Have you ever wondered how a mischievous boy from a small river town became one of the greatest writers and cultural icons America has ever produced? Mark Twain, born Samuel Langhorne Clemens, wasn't just a humorist in a white suit. He was a pilot of the Mississippi, a miner, a journalist, a global traveler, and above all, a sharp-eyed critic of human folly. Today, we're diving into Ron Chernow's Mark Twain, a sweeping biography that reveals the man behind the wit, the tragedies behind the laughter, and the adventures that shaped one of literature's most unforgettable voices. Let's begin. Prelude, The Pilot House. The biography opens with Twain's return to the Mississippi River later in life. The pilot house of a steamboat was his sanctuary, the place where he first tasted independence. Twain once said that a steamboat pilot was the only truly free man on earth. Even kings and presidents had masters, but not the river pilot. Steering again after years away, he was overwhelmed by nostalgia. The river had changed, but in the pilot house, he felt young and unburdened. This love of freedom and truth, and his longing for lost youth, would define Twain's life and writings. Chernow also clears away the myth of Twain as just a cigar-smoking humorist. He was sharp, biting, and often furious at society's hypocrisy. His humor had vinegar in it, not sugar. And though he cherished his role as entertainer, he was also America's critic, irreverent, restless, and deeply contradictory. Mark Twain's family history begins in struggle and pride. His father, John Marshall Clemens, a stiff, prideful man, and his mother, Jane Lambton, a spirited woman full of humor, entered a loveless marriage. Jane had married John as a rebound after being jilted, and Twain later described his father as cold, humorless, and emotionally distant. Jane, by contrast, was lively, witty, and compassionate, especially toward the downtrodden, though she also shared in the cultural blind spots of the slaveholding South. This contrast between stern father and affectionate mother shaped young Sam Clemens. Rebellion against authority on one side, love for storytelling and warmth on the other. Growing up in Hannibal, Missouri, Sam Clemens was wild, funny, and constantly in trouble. He hated school, preferred pranks to discipline, and seemed destined to amount to nothing. Yet his gift for storytelling and humor shone early. He idolized the outlaw spirit of poor, scrappy boys like Tom Blankenship, who later inspired Huckleberry Finn. His mischievousness masked a deep desire for attention, fame, and freedom. Hannibal itself was a river town alive with steamboats, commerce, and slavery. Sam's boyhood in this setting would provide the raw material for Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. At 12, after his father's death, Sam left school and became a printer's apprentice. In the print shop, he devoured books, Robin Hood, the Arabian Nights, the Count of Monte Cristo. He learned that words could create entire worlds, and he sharpened his wit by reading stories aloud to entertain his peers. Though lowly work, the print shop gave him his first taste of writing and the printed word's power. Despite hardships, Sam remembered his boyhood with affection. Barefoot summers, adventures in caves, fishing on the Mississippi. It was an idyllic existence. Hannibal was poor but vibrant, and children roamed freely, inventing their own worlds. Twain later mined these memories for Tom Sawyer, transforming his chaotic childhood into a nostalgic national treasure. Sam's circle of friends included poor, ragged boys whom polite society shunned. They were pranksters, thieves of fruit, and free spirits. Twain admired their independence and resistance to rules. In these figures, he saw genuine humanity, in contrast to the pious, well-behaved children he detested. This sympathy for outsiders and rebels would color much of his fiction and satire. Sam's mischief often worried his mother, yet she loved him fiercely. He was constantly inventing wild stories, exaggerating reality for humor. Jane Clemens once said she discounted 90% of Sam's tales, but the remaining 10% was pure gold. She saw in him the gift of turning life into comedy, even if he exasperated everyone around him. The Mississippi River was the defining backdrop of Sam's youth. He and his friends swam, fished, smoked corncob pipes, and dreamed of adventure on its islands and banks. The river represented freedom, danger, and possibility. Twain later called it the most beautiful and most dangerous of companions. His lifelong obsession with the river began here. Twain's imagination was fed by Hannibal's blend of idleness and adventure. The town was slow-paced, yet the arrival of steamboats turned it electric. These contrasting rhythms, lazy days mixed with sudden excitement, mirrored Twain's own restless personality, torn between longing for ease and hunger for action. Tragedy touched Twain's childhood when his beloved sister Margaret died young. Her death left a deep mark, showing Sam the fragility of life. Death and loss would haunt his writing, often hidden beneath humor. Twain once described himself as moving between deep melancholy and half-insane tempests of humor. This tension had roots in his early losses. Twain grew up in a slaveholding society. As a boy, he witnessed cruelty toward enslaved people, including brutal beatings and even killings, all treated as normal. His family owned and rented enslaved workers. Though Twain absorbed the prejudices of his environment, he gradually came to abhor slavery. This contradiction between boyhood conditioning and adult conscience shaped the moral conflict at the heart of Huckleberry Finn. In Hannibal, Twain was surrounded by colorful characters, and one of the most important was his sister Pamela. She became a stabilizing figure, offering guidance and affection in a household overshadowed by poverty and loss. Pamela's nurturing nature contrasted sharply with her father's coldness, and she was one of the first people who encouraged Twain's creative spark. Their bond showed Twain how family ties could provide strength even amid hardship. This chapter closes part 1 with a symbolic gift, the values and contradictions of Twain's upbringing. He inherited his father's pride, his mother's wit, and his community's entanglement with slavery and freedom. These early experiences were the wedding present life gave him, burdens and blessings wrapped together. They would follow him into adulthood, shaping the stories and satires that would make him immortal. Part 1 paints the portrait of a boy torn between poverty and possibility, tragedy and comedy, rebellion and conformity. Hannibal, the Mississippi River, the harshness of slavery, and the warmth of his mother all combined to forge Samuel Clemens, the boy who would become Mark Twain. His childhood adventures, sorrows, and dreams weren't just memories. They were the foundation of an extraordinary literary life. In the years after his boyhood, Twain entered a world intoxicated by speculation. The Gilded Age, a term he himself would coin, was full of reckless investments and dreams of quick fortunes. Twain dabbled enthusiastically, chasing wealth through ventures that often failed. This era was his first immersion into the feverish spirit of American capitalism, a theme that would haunt him for decades. Twain's life as a steamboat pilot taught him discipline, precision, and independence. He revered the profession for the authority it gave, yet it was precarious work. A cuckoo clock, out of sync and mocking in its mechanical absurdity, symbolized the fragility of human control compared to the vast river. Twain began to develop the sense that human ambition was always at the mercy of larger, uncontrollable forces. Twain's imagination exploded beyond the river, reaching for the stars. He joked about chartering a comet to Mars, but beneath the humor lay his restlessness. He was no longer content with the small world of Hannibal or the Mississippi. He craved exploration and novelty. This ambition foreshadowed his journeys westward and abroad, where he would chronicle landscapes and cultures with the same mix of awe and irony. Twain's early attempts to find his footing in journalism, lecturing, and writing left him feeling unmoored and invertebrate without a country. He experimented with careers, searching for stability but rejecting convention. This restless wandering, both literal and metaphorical, shaped his identity as an outsider who would critique society from the margins. Twain's humor began winning him attention on the lecture circuit. One of his most famous early pieces was a playful toast to infants, turning sentimentality into satire. This chapter shows Twain honing his stage presence, discovering the power of his spoken voice and transforming comedy into performance art. Audiences loved him because he mingled affection with sharp irony. Twain became fascinated with inventions, especially machines that promised to change the world. He invested heavily in new technology, such as typesetting machines, that he believed would make him rich. But his optimism often blinded him to practical realities. His obsession with mechanical wonders revealed both his visionary spirit and his vulnerability to financial disaster. This chapter highlights Twain's encounters with eccentric characters, such as Hallelujah Jennings, whose quirks and zeal reflected the energy of the age. Twain collected personalities like raw material, later transforming them into unforgettable characters in his fiction. Each strange encounter deepened his sense that America was a land of oddities, brimming with both comedy and tragedy. Twain's fame grew alongside other great figures of his time. He was often paired with contemporaries, fellow writers, lecturers, and humorists, in what became known as the Twins of Genius tours. These joint appearances showcased Twain's quick wit, improvisational brilliance, and ability to hold audiences spellbound. It was here that he solidified his reputation as America's foremost humorist. The theme of moral conflict, later central to Huckleberry Finn, began crystallizing in Twain's life. He believed that a true human heart could be compassionate, but society often deformed it with prejudice and cruelty. Twain himself wrestled with these contradictions, particularly around slavery and race. This moral duality became one of his most powerful literary contributions. Twain dipped into politics, aligning himself at times with reformers known as mugwumps. He was skeptical of parties and ideologies, yet he could not resist weighing in on corruption and hypocrisy. His wit skewered politicians, exposing frauds while entertaining audiences. Twain was not a consistent politician, but his sharp eye made him a moral gadfly. In this chapter, Twain took a bold stand, calling for justice and reparations for African Americans. His views were radical for the time, showing his ability to outgrow the prejudices of his upbringing. He saw slavery as a national sin requiring restitution. Though his words sometimes shocked polite society, they revealed a conscience unwilling to remain silent. Twain skewered hypocrisy wherever he saw it, coining the phrase, "no pockets in the armor," to describe the human tendency to hide vulnerabilities beneath false bravado. His satire cut deep, but also invited people to laugh at their own pretensions. This ability to expose weakness without losing charm was key to his enduring appeal. One of Twain's great missions was the destruction of shams, false authority, empty traditions, and self-important elites. He relished ridiculing inflated reputations and sham morality. This chapter shows Twain embracing his role as social critic, a man who would strip away illusions with humor sharper than a blade. Tragedy continued to shadow Twain's life. Friends and loved ones died, and financial failures mounted. At times, Twain himself was prone to illusions, believing in get-rich-quick schemes or idealized visions of the world. The combination of grief and self-deception pushed him into cycles of despair, only to be rescued by bursts of creativity and humor. Part 2 closes with Twain brushing shoulders with the wealthy elite of the Gilded Age, such as the Vanderbilts. Though he craved wealth and respect, he also mocked the very class he aspired to join. This paradox, admiration mixed with satire, defined Twain's complicated relationship with money and status. He could never quite decide if he wanted to belong or to ridicule those who did. In Floodtide, we see Twain growing restless, ambitious, and conflicted. He pursued fortune through invention and speculation, honed his craft as a humorist, and took daring stands on race and politics. Yet he remained vulnerable to illusions and contradictions. This was Twain in his prime, restless, brilliant, reckless, and unforgettable. Twain's life accelerated into turbulence. Fame and opportunity expanded his world, but with it came instability. He leapt headlong into ventures without hesitation, a pattern that defined much of his career. Twain was no longer just a regional humorist. he was on the cusp of becoming an international figure. With The Innocents Abroad, Twain's reputation skyrocketed. His irreverent take on Europe's traditions and his celebration of the brash, practical American spirit made him a literary sensation. Twain embodied the Yankee in literature, plain-spoken, skeptical, funny, and bold. Readers loved his mix of satire and travelogue, which poked holes in European pretensions while affirming American identity. Twain's marriage to Olivia Langdon, Livy, brought stability and refinement to his life. She was cultured, religious, and from a wealthy family, offering Twain access to circles he had long admired. Yet their relationship was full of tension. Twain adored her, but also felt inadequate. He admitted that she always beats me in moral authority, as she tried to temper his irreverence and push him toward respectability. Settling in Buffalo, Twain enjoyed a new domestic life with Livy. Their early years were full of affection and hope. Yet Buffalo was also a place of personal tragedy, as illness and death struck their household. This mix of happiness and grief mirrored Twain's lifelong pattern, joy always shadowed by loss. The pressures of providing for his family and living up to new social expectations often overwhelmed Twain. At times, he was frightened out of his wits, unsure of his abilities to balance creativity, finances, and domestic life. These insecurities drove him to work feverishly, but also left him vulnerable to rash decisions. Twain became a celebrated lecturer, his performances described as mesmerizing. Audiences laughed until they cried, enchanted by his timing, delivery, and storytelling genius. He was dubbed the godlike squealer, able to hold crowds in rapture. This period established Twain not only as a writer, but as a national entertainer whose voice captured the American spirit. Flush with earnings, Twain and Livy built an extravagant mansion in Hartford, Connecticut. The house symbolized success and artistic ambition. Lavishly decorated and socially prominent, it became a hub for writers and intellectuals. Yet the grandeur also reflected Twain's growing entanglement with money and image, ambitions that would later cause him pain. Twain found companionship and joy in young girls whom he affectionately called his angel fish. This peculiar aspect of his life was rooted in his longing for innocence and freedom from adult burdens. Though platonic, these friendships raised eyebrows and revealed Twain's struggle to reconcile his public persona with private yearnings. By now, Twain's health and spirits fluctuated. He described himself as having a rusty old whistle in his chest, a metaphor for both physical decline and emotional weariness. Despite his exhaustion, he continued to write and perform, driven by financial pressures and the demands of fame. Twain's worldview grew darker. He declared that everything human is pathetic, expressing deep disillusionment with politics, religion, and human nature. Yet even in this pessimism, he found comedy. His satire became sharper, cutting through the false optimism of the age with biting truth. Amid the turmoil, Twain produced The Prince and the Pauper, a novel that captured his fascination with class, identity, and injustice. It was both a children's tale and a critique of social inequality. The book reflected Twain's duality, playful storytelling paired with serious moral concerns. Twain delighted in mocking solemn jackassery, pompous institutions, moral pretenders, and cultural elites. This chapter shows him as most irreverent, lampooning figures who took themselves too seriously. His ridicule was not mere comedy. It was social commentary designed to puncture inflated authority. Despite his professional triumphs, Twain's personal life was marked by sorrow. The deaths of children and loved ones left him shattered, a haggard ruin of former joy. He masked grief with humor, but beneath the laughter lay despair. These losses deepened his skepticism about life's fairness. Twain described certain periods of his life as a species of hell, consumed by financial stress, family tragedies, and unrelenting public expectations. His success became a burden, trapping him in cycles of work and worry. Yet out of this turmoil came some of his most powerful writing. In a telling metaphor, Twain compared his mix of humor and tragedy to a pinch of morphine in a half-pint of whiskey. His laughter dulled the pain of life's wounds, but never erased them. This chapter captures the essence of Twain's art. Comedy laced with melancholy, always aware of mortality. Twain's travels expanded his horizons. He embraced the chance to see the whole vast world and all its contents, journeying abroad to gather material and experiences. These voyages enriched his perspective, making him a global figure and giving his work a universal resonance. Twain wrestled with morality, justice, and religion. He questioned the gap between divine law and human law, often finding organized religion hypocritical. His skepticism deepened, and he became a fierce critic of dogma, while still searching for meaning in morality and conscience. Loss struck again, plunging Twain into mourning. He confessed, "My heart is heavy with grief," as personal tragedies piled upon him. His writing during these times became more somber, reflecting the toll of repeated bereavements. Twain's self-loathing surfaced in moments of failure and despair. He berated himself as a miserable son of a bitch, evidence of his internal battles with guilt, inadequacy, and anger. These confessions revealed the fragility beneath the wit, a man struggling to live up to his own legend. Twain often rationalized his failings as not guiltless, but excusable. He was aware of his contradictions, moral stands mixed with moral lapses, generosity paired with selfishness. This self-awareness fueled his satire. He mocked others because he first mocked himself. Twain's imagination remained fertile, bursting with stories and characters. He often claimed, "I could a tale unfold," brimming with creative ideas even as he struggled with discipline. This tension between inspiration and doubt defined his middle years, when masterpieces competed with abandoned projects. In rapids, Twain's life surged forward with exhilarating speed and crushing loss. His marriage, fame, and creative triumphs were matched by grief, financial strain, and self-doubt. He became the voice of America, loved for his humor and admired for his honesty, yet privately tormented by sorrow and contradiction. Twain was now fully a global celebrity, and a man swept into the rapids of his own destiny. Financial disaster struck Twain with brutal force. Investments in doomed inventions and reckless ventures drained his fortune. He described the calamity as the crash of the planet, a personal apocalypse that left him humiliated. For a man who long craved wealth and security, bankruptcy was both a material and emotional ruin. Twain's personal failures mirrored what he saw in America's larger decline into corruption and greed. He railed against the bankruptcy of a nation that allowed monopolies, imperialism, and moral decay to flourish. His satire became darker, reflecting both his own misfortune and the wider failures of society. Even in ruin, Twain wielded his pen with power. He produced scathing satires that expose hypocrisy in politics, religion, and business. One such work was hailed as one of the most notable satires of the era. His humor grew sharper in proportion to his anger, and audiences could not look away. Twain provoked outrage by attacking sacred institutions. He deliberately stirred the hornet's nest with essays and lectures that criticized imperialism, missionary zeal, and corporate greed. Though controversial, these works cemented his role as a fearless social critic, unafraid to face backlash. Personal tragedies deepened his despair. The deaths of his daughter Susie and other loved ones left Twain shattered. Friends described him as the saddest man that ever lived. Though he masked grief with public wit, privately he sank into depression, haunted by the relentless toll of loss. Twain wrote pieces that he dared not publish in his lifetime, labeling them to be read only by mature minds. These works, filled with bitterness and doubt, revealed his bleakest views of humanity, religion, and morality. They were too explosive for his era, but they showed the uncompromising honesty of his inner voice. Despite despair, Twain's reputation soared. He was hailed as America's conscience, the one voice unafraid to confront national hypocrisy. Crowds adored him, not just for his humor, but for his courage in speaking uncomfortable truths. Twain had become more than an entertainer. He was a moral witness. When Twain lost his beloved wife Livy, grief consumed him. He was inconsolable, writing that his heart was broken beyond repair. Yet his mourning resonated far beyond his home. The world grieved with him, recognizing that Twain's personal sorrows were woven into his art and that his pain reflected universal human loss. In his later years, Twain's outlook grew increasingly bitter. He declared that there is no humor in heaven, rejecting religious comfort. His writings reflected this cynicism, laced with anger at human cruelty and divine silence. Yet, even in despair, he could not silence his comedic instinct, finding dark laughter in suffering. Twain fashioned a new persona in his final years, the white-suited elder statesman of American letters. Dressed in his trademark outfit, he became an icon of wisdom, humor, and candor. The world revered him as the man in white, a living legend whose presence evoked both joy and melancholy. As his health declined, Twain faced death with the same mix of defiance and wit that had defined his life. He quipped about his impending end, yet he also longed for peace after so much grief. In 1910, as Halley's Comet returned to the skies, Twain passed away. It felt like the closing of a cosmic circle. He had been born with the comet's arrival, and he left with its return. Storm brings Twain's story to its haunting conclusion. Financial collapse, unbearable personal losses, and a darkened worldview marked his final decades. Yet through it all, he remained America's most piercing satirist, an artist who wrapped tragedy in laughter and made the nation see itself with unflinching clarity. Twain's storm-tossed life ended, but his voice, defiant, comic, and human, continues to echo across time. After his death in 1910, Mark Twain's reputation only grew. He was remembered as America's greatest humorist, a writer who captured both the comedy and tragedy of the human condition. His works became cornerstones of American literature, studied and celebrated around the world. Critics hailed Twain as America's Shakespeare. His ability to blend wit, satire, and deep human insight placed him among the literary immortals. Like Shakespeare, Twain's characters, Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer, the Duke, and the King, seemed to live beyond the page, embodying universal truths about innocence, corruption, and freedom. Twain's legacy was not without controversy. His candid depictions of race, slavery, and social hypocrisy continued to spark debate. Some found his language offensive, while others praised his honesty. This tension kept his works alive, ensuring they remained relevant as society wrestled with the same moral questions Twain had confronted. Twain's influence spread beyond literature into the broader culture of humor. His wit inspired generations of comedians, essayists, and satirists. He founded what critics called the Great Republic of Humor, a tradition of American comedy that combined irreverence with moral critique. Twain's writing continued to be seen as a voice for freedom from tyranny, hypocrisy, and dogma. His defense of justice, even when unpopular, marked him as more than a humorist. He was a conscience for his age and for generations to come. Twain was not just an American icon. He was a global figure. His books were translated into dozens of languages, and his lectures had taken him across continents. In Europe, Asia, and beyond, readers embraced his humor and insight, seeing in Twain the universality of human folly and hope. After his death, Twain's home in Hartford and his boyhood town of Hannibal became sites of pilgrimage. Scholars pored over his papers, and tourists flocked to the Mississippi to retrace his steps. Twain had become both a subject of serious study and a symbol of national nostalgia. Twain's life seemed bound to Halley's Comet, born during its arrival and gone with its return. This cosmic coincidence became a poetic symbol of his place in history, a brilliant, blazing figure who streaked across the sky, leaving behind a trail of light. His story became myth as much as biography. The enduring lesson of Twain's life is the power of laughter to confront despair. He showed that humor is not the opposite of sorrow, but its companion, a way to face life's tragedies without surrendering to them. Twain's legacy is not only in his words, but in the courage to look at the world honestly and still find a reason to laugh. Mark Twain's legacy endures because he spoke to the heart of the human condition, the contradictions, the follies, the resilience. He was America's jester and prophet, critic and dreamer. His works remain as fresh and provocative as when they were written, ensuring that the stormy, laughing voice of Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, will never be silenced. In legacy, we see Twain not only as a man of his time, but as a figure for all ages. His humor, his critique of hypocrisy, and his embrace of human weakness continue to shape how we understand ourselves. Twain lives on, in laughter, in literature, and in the conscience of a world that still needs his voice. Mark Twain's life was full of contradictions, joy and sorrow, humor and despair, ambition and failure. Yet out of this storm, he forged a voice that still speaks to us today. His works remind us that laughter can be a weapon against hypocrisy and a balm for grief, and that honesty, even when uncomfortable, is the truest form of courage. If you enjoyed this journey through Twain's remarkable life, don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth book summaries, and share this story with someone who loves great literature. Twain once said, "The human race has one really effective weapon, and that is laughter." More than a century later, his words remain our guide.